One of the things that I found to be the most valuable experience I've ever had in my life is studying under some of the best woodworkers throughout the world. And what I intend to do is take that knowledge that they've passed on to me and make a video series to teach you some of the really important things about woodworking that you probably aren't familiar with. The very first tape is a tape on advanced jigs and fixtures made for the router. With the router, there's a lot of things that you have to understand before we get right into jigs and fixtures. The very first being the types of routers that are available to us today. We have such a variety of routers and such an array of what each one is specified to be able to do, we have to understand which one best suits our needs. So I'd like to cover these very quickly to give you a feel to make certain that if you've got a certain operation that you're going to do, that you've chosen the right router. The very first router is a general router. It's one that probably you're the most familiar with. Most hardware stores carry general types of routers. One thing to look for in general routers is the grips. With good grips, it should be balanced in your hand because these routers are usually used for hand routing type operations. As a matter of fact, it is without a doubt the most common router sold today. The next type of router is the plastic laminate trim router. And unfortunately, we think of it only as a laminate router, when in reality it's a great router for doing work with veneers, with doing small detail carving work, and so on. As a matter of fact, it has different attachments that can fit on it to do different types of operations. And it has one really unique feature in that it has a tilt base. None of the other routers offer a tilt base. And just imagine the capability of how you can change your routing techniques just by taking your router bit to another plane. The next one probably is the most common router we have today, and that's a plunge router. Great things about the plunge router. It's been around for probably about 10 years. And one of the best things is a safety feature. The router bit, when the router is not in use, is not exposed underneath. So it's really a safe router to have and to operate. Another great thing is we can actually set the bit ahead of time and plunge into the work, make our cut, and when we're done, plunge back out again. Another thing, this router is great for duplication, so we can make several pieces exactly the same with this one router. We'll use it quite a bit today in our demonstrations. The next router is a pretty new router that's out, and it's a D-handled router. This is for freehand type routing where you actually are going to be holding the router. It's not meant for a router table. The thing is with this, what we've done is we've changed our center of gravity that we had on our first router, and we've moved it back behind. So now whenever we do a lot of routing on a tabletop, we can actually get in behind it and push the router as we do our work. It's a great router for hands-on, heavy-duty routing operations. The next type of router is a flexible shaft router. One of the great things about it is it has a flexible shaft that takes us to where our cutter is, and with this we can do power carving or we can do detail carving away from the motor source. One of the key aspects to routers is maintenance. Probably the most overlooked thing is actually the information contained in the owner's manual. I recommend that with whatever router you purchase, you definitely go through and read your manual. The next most important thing is when you get your router, you need to verify that all of the screws are intact and that they're tight, and that all the parts on it that are supposed to move and function all work and function independently of each other. Nothing hits. There's no bindings anywhere. Another important maintenance tip is to keep things well lubricated. There are a variety of lubricants that are made today. I recommend something that doesn't have an oil base to it because dust has a tendency to be attracted to oil. With your router bits today, with all of the choices we have, bearings are something that are always overlooked, and there are all kinds of good sprays to help maintain the bearing life. Probably the most common routine maintenance we have for our router is to maintain the collet. The collet is actually what holds the router bit in place as we do the routing operations. And because of that, sometimes little burrs can build up on the inside of the collet. It's good to have a little brush that we can go in and clean out any of those burrs with. Also, if you don't have a brush, fine grit sandpaper works just as well. There are threads on the inside of the nut that holds the collet into place, and threads along the outside here that can sometimes get messed up with sawdust and build up pitch and tar, and those need to be cleaned out periodically as well. And I definitely recommend having some type of a brush, whether it be a toothbrush or a metal brush. They both work very, very well. Once it's all clean and maintained, then everything should fit right back down just nice and clean. The next thing is to take your router and to blow it out. A lot of times we overlook that, but it helps keep the dust from building up on the inside portion of the router, and it'll always run smoother for that. Probably the most overlooked maintenance item that we have is to maintain the carbon brushes that are inside the router. You need to take them out periodically and check that the height is exactly what's listed in your owner's manual. With routing, there are several methods to hold our piece into place as we work it. I'm going to show you several of them. One way, probably not way of choice, is to nail it down.